All right, I am not exactly sure how to lead into a video like this. I think the most important thing to say right off the bat is that this video is going to be covering a lot of topics that aren't very safe for work. Like if you're 18 years or younger, you should not be watching this because some of the things that are mentioned or at least have some relevance to this topic are legitimately foul. So there's your warning. If you're a minor, this is your cue to head out. Yeah, so this video is going to be very unstructured, if I had to guess. I'm going to try and maintain focus on things as best I can. Um, I mostly wanted to get my thoughts out there because I've seen a lot of rhetoric pushed about this topic by a lot of, popular creators, relevant figureheads in and out of the communities that Gomotion was involved in, shit like that. And I honestly disagree with a lot of it. I think the main thesis behind this video is that Gomotion is a lot more than someone who, is someone who has a lot of unchecked mental illness and shit that needs to be dealt with immediately. I believe that Gomotion is a manipulator to her fans, to her friends, to basically anyone who's even had a whiff of this controversy. She has intentionally engaged in deceptive behavior that is essentially made, like tailor made to salvage whatever reputation she has and justify her behavior somehow to as many eyes as possible. I guess the TLDR is that this video is made to prove, in my eyes at least, that Gomotion is an extremely manipulative person who is going to try and appeal to you in whatever way she can to scrounge up any benefits she can, like monetary, social, etc. She does not deserve your support, she does not deserve your sympathy, and she does not deserve a platform. Not anymore, at least. Okay, so if we, I have a note document that I made for it. Okay, so I just went on like a 2 minute rant about the idea of framing, and I tried to explain it in excruciating detail, and I don't think that's really a good use of our time. So I am just going to try and condense my ideas down into as concise of a form as they can be in. Um, what's my first? This is my first agenda. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at these two tweets, right? The first is about Exploshi. That's a whole other can of worms that I'm not going to get into. And the other is in response to, I think this is some guy who thought Gomotion was a groomer like way before these allegations came to light. No clue what the deal is with this, but I've seen a lot of people dig up these tweets just as a kind of herder, look who's the hypocrite. But it's important to acknowledge that these tweets serve to paint Gomotion as a bigger person than she really is. Like, let's take a look at the date on these two tweets. March 2021, February 2024. You can argue semantics regarding whether or not the shit she did pre-2021 could class as grooming or not, but at the very least for this tweet, Gomotion knows what she's doing is manipulative because she had already groomed someone by the time this tweet came out. So what purpose does this tweet serve? It's to make her fans believe that she would never do something like that and to discredit the idea that she would engage in any of that kind of behavior. So what we're seeing here is someone who is almost trying to discredit any allegations of grooming before they even come out. As a bit of supplemental evidence for this, I want to talk Gomotion Discord. So a lot of the shit I'm about to talk about doesn't actually have surviving receipts, none that I have access to anyways. But I know there's a ton of people out there who can confirm this statement is true. So Gomotion has repeatedly touted the idea that she's uncomfortable talking to minors. At the very least, she's brought this idea up multiple times in her Discord service. And this is a major sticking point behind the second Gomotion Discord dying off. So for those who are out of the loop, there are 3 Gomotion Discords that have or had existed to my knowledge. A bunch of the active user base of the second Gomotion Discord were minors, and Gomotion had said she didn't want to be interacting with minors any longer. Actually, important distinction. Gomotion specifically singled out people who were under 16. I actually forgot about this. This was because this person who came forward with allegations against Gomotion was still a minor at the time. It'd be a bit strange for them specifically to be an exception to the rule unless there was some weird shit going on. And a similar thing happened in a third Gomotion Discord where they kicked off anyone who wasn't 18 years old at the minimum. Actually, at this point, I believe it's important to clarify that I'm not trying to insinuate that anyone who wants to maintain an 18 plus environment is engaged in this grand conspiracy where they're trying to hide the fact that they're a groomer, but I want to draw your attention to the fact that Gomotion did all of this knowing that she had groomed T before, having this pretty pristine track record of, never wanting to engage with people younger than her, and in Exploshi's case, actively going after creators who had pretty bad shit tied to them regarding conflict with a minor. Essentially, she's trying to position herself as someone who wasn't interested in even DMing a minor, much less grooming one. It gives me the impression that Gomotion thought the allegations wouldn't be as well documented as they are now, or on the other hand, maybe she'd be able to continue manipulating T such that these allegations would never be brought to light. Actually, on that note, I don't feel like referring to the primary victim of Gomotion as the tickler. Actually, I don't think. Yep. It just seems a little silly, so I'll just be using T for their name. I think Gomotion actually does that. Yeah, they do that in their document. I'm just going to do that. Okay, so it is my personal belief that Gomotion has, at the very least, been trying to cover her ass before any sort of grooming allegations were even brought up. Whether or not you take my pretty underdeveloped string of ideas at face value is your call. Wouldn't exactly blame you for disagreeing. Now, my main point of concern is this document right here, as well as the actions Gomotion has taken immediately after the allegations came out and after her response document came out. Actually, for the sake of keeping things chronological, let's look at their actions immediately following the allegations. Credit to the Nefarious Clown for screen capping these. Nice tag, by the way. Yeah, so these screenshots, to me at least, are extremely telling. This tweet was published 9:57 a.m. my time, August 2nd, 2025. The document came out 5:24 p.m. August 1st, 2025. So this tweet was published less than a day after the document came out. Gomotion's knee-jerk reaction was to go to her Discord, somewhere she knows she's going to have ardent supporters who are going to extend her the benefit of the doubt, even if she doesn't deserve it, right? Her immediate MO is to discredit the allegations. Let's look at this right here. Vehemently angry at the way this doc was written, right? Angry and disgusted at the way some things have been laid out. You get the idea. This pattern of behavior also happens in a response document. This is not something you say if you know you're innocent. This is something you do when you want to downplay the shit you've done to someone, which she does later in a response document. Actually, I'm thinking of a random line from the H. Bomber Guy plagiarism video. He says something along the lines of, if this was a defensible thing that they're doing, they'd be defending it. They'd say, this is a normal thing to do and I'm going to keep doing it. Basically, everything she says in these screenshots is laced with an attempt to make what she's done seem less extreme. Also, while I'm on these screenshots, this shit really gets to me. I was very obsessive, but we are both codependent, right? And she was also obsessive. This is not only an extremely ridiculous thing to say when you're approached with grooming allegations. Your first instinct is to say, oh, but they were also in the wrong too. Really? But it's also a complete mask-off attempt to try and scramble for any way to defend yourself. If you actually take the time to read this giant-ass document, it becomes abundantly clear that none of what Gomotion does is defensible in any sense of the word, much less with the idea of, oh, but what if T was also obsessive? That makes it okay, right? It's just cooked. It's just cooked. So from here, let's now move to the main response document. I'm going to assume anyone watching has already read the original document by T, at least in some capacity. So actually, I think it's very important to pay attention to how resistant Gomotion is to the label of groomer. This is a major sticking point for her. She talks about this a ton in the shit she sent in her server a while before this doc is even written. And there's a lot of language thrown around when it comes to this label, which we'll get to. But I think it's important to define what grooming is, because as we'll see later on, Gomotion intentionally tries to create a sort of smokescreen as to what really counts as grooming, as well as essentially she tries to use a loophole to sort of absolve her of the label of a groomer, you know? So this is from Praesidium? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is from Praesidium Incorporated, an organization which is focused on sexual abuse prevention for over 30 years. The reason why I chose this definition in particular is it gives you a very clear idea of what grooming entails and is relatively easy to parse. Also, I didn't feel like using Wikipedia, so this was the option that seemed the most sensible, to me at least. You're free to use your own definitions, websites, what have you, and sort of draw your own conclusions when it comes to this. Anyway, we'll be referring back to this to take a more comprehensive look at Gomotion's behavior. The document hasn't even started going over Gomotion's actions towards T, and you're already going after an appeal to emotion. Like, before anything is discussed, we're talking about your issues with gender dysphoria, having a history of mental health issues, verbal abuse, shit like that. Okay, not something you want to have anyone go through, right? But it's important we analyze this within the context of Gomotion is trying to shield herself from grooming allegations. You're intentionally, like, the way this paragraph is placed, this isn't coincidental. It's not an act of random chance that she establishes background like this. You're trying to create a sort of sympathetic narrative. And like, oh, woe is me, I only did this because of my background. You're giving the reader any reason you can to be like, okay, well, what she did wasn't as bad because her upbringing was shitty. She didn't know any better. And to that end, I don't really expect anyone here to actually align with that pattern of thinking, but it stands to reason that this was the direct intent behind writing her document like this, you know? This is important, you know? She acknowledges here directly T is also in an extremely vulnerable place. And she's a minor at the time, at the very least, March 19th, 2020. Isn't that strange? We'll come back to this later. Okay, here's another instance of trying to deflect blame from herself. We are placing her tendency to overshare with a minor directly next to a mention of OCD. Now, it's not. I want to make it clear that the existence of OCD and gender dysphoria, people can struggle with that and still be normal people. If you're watching this and you deal with either of them, I want to make it clear that your struggle with these two issues are valid. I'm not like discrediting OCD as being something that could like cause severe issues with someone. And it's entirely possible that our OCD, Gomotion's OCD and gender dysphoria and whatever had an impact on how she conducted her behavior with T, right? But it's not like the be-all end-all. The fact is that you, basically since the moment you started interacting with T, where's the example I want to pull up? Yep, this one right here. The fact is, since this is, okay, March 19, 2020, 4 days after you start consistently interacting with T. Basically, since the moment you start interacting with T, you engage in behavior you should know is fucked up beyond all reason. Like, we're talking about dropping your self-harm habits within a week of meeting them. Talking about how you, quote, wish you were them. Like, on several occasions throughout this massive block of interactions in between early to late 2020, right? I sort of distracted myself from the point I was trying to make because I wanted to clarify that I don't wish to invalidate Gomotion's experiences with mental illness. My main point was that the placement of these two sentences, right? It's, again, none of this is coincidental. Her issues with OCD are only relevant to this document to try and explain away the shit she's done, right? This happens multiple times. The idea behind mentioning OCD within one sentence of addressing your issues with oversharing, which, may I remind you, did entail talking about self-harm to a 15-year-old within 1 week of meeting them. One. So we have to consider that moving forward. It'll come up again later on in this document. I'll draw our attention to that once it's relevant. Yes, this is textbook manipulation for this document. This kind of strategy Gomotion uses over and over again to try and deflect blame from herself. This idea, right? Referring to a 15 or 16-year-old as your sister, never alluding to anything more than a sincere platonic affection, right? This is, I'm not even sure I even have to tell you, this is just open-faced manipulation. We're stressing the platonic lens here when we want to talk about grooming. This is how she tried to establish trust and exploit T. Bear in mind, I'm going to refer to the original document by T real quick. I believe it's around like page 30 or something. Yep. Where does it start? Right here. There we go. 4 days after you start consistently interacting with her. That's not something you do if you're just trying to express sincere platonic affection. This is 4 days after you start consistently interacting with T. This is just grooming. Gomotion is lying to you. And this only becomes more clear with how the very next thing she covers is a whole page's worth of DMs showing that T reciprocated this label. But like, is this not just victim blaming? If we entertain the idea that this is a grooming behavior meant to establish control over her victim, all this does is prove it worked. So it is my personal belief that Gomotion intentionally, over the course of this document, stresses this supposed platonic intent as a means to obscure behaviors that establish a grooming dynamic, okay? All right, this was the main part of the doc that essentially destroyed Gomotion's reputation in the eyes of those who read the document. Like, basically all the discourse surrounding this response essentially laser focused on this area, and for good reason. I don't really have much to add here that hasn't already been said. It's pretty clear that this is just plainly obvious sexual misconduct. But it's important to acknowledge again that Gomotion is trying to reframe this as like harmless self-exploration. She really stresses the idea of, yeah, this was a coping mechanism about gender dysphoria, etc., etc. It's her trying to mask her predatory behavior by presenting it in a way that she can claim had, yeah, quote, no ulterior motives to it. Which, like, come the fuck on. Really? I don't think I have to tell you that this can be taken as sexual attraction towards a minor that you are now reframing as something you did to deal with gender dysphoria. Like, there are ulterior motives to the way you wrote this down. I don't know. I don't exactly think Gomotion is very trustworthy when she says this. Okay, I'm going to have to watch my words in this specific section as to not get this video taken down or some shit. Honestly, editor me is probably going to hate how much they have to censor in this video. Anyway, this was the next part of the document which stuck out to me. This area, right here. Now, you're free to read this on your own accord. I mainly want to focus on the almost overemphasis on this idea of consent. If you've read either of these documents, you'll know that the intimacy and general closeness of T and Gomotion has been escalating since they first began talking. In this specific time frame, this would be over the course of 2.5 years, I think. It is with this in mind that we have to acknowledge that a power imbalance did exist and is at least partially acknowledged by Gomotion in this document. Like when we talked about the whole older sister, younger sister type deal, that's just textbook power imbalance. She's 18 at the time, T is 15 or 16 at the time, just textbook. Essentially, Gomotion is trying to sidestep the actual problem with this behavior. It's not about consent, right? Gomotion has already gone over how the two were emotionally codependent with each other. Yep, both feeding into each other's fear of abandonment. And there is a pre-existing age gap between them. There's that power imbalance, right? By emphasizing consent and nothing else, you essentially try and erase any prior context of grooming or coercion that you've engaged with T prior to this point. So the point that Gomotion tries to make, that this is somehow consensual, is complete nonsense and should not be taken into account. She's basically admitting that she is a groomer with this segment of text. And actually, this leads nicely into the next few paragraphs, which retread over these same general ideas. This is in contrast to the original document's claim that I made myself into T's girlfriend, the framing of the statement feels intentionally misleading. Bang! There's your smoking gun. The entire point of this document is to discredit T. It's not coded. It's not even subtext. Like, there are already inklings of this idea with the shit Gomotion said in her server, just in general. Like, she went into detail on how she didn't like how things were laid out. This is, in my opinion, the underlying purpose of this document. She's trying to get her audience to think of T as unreliable or untrustworthy, and that she's the rational truth teller in this debacle. Yep, there's that again. T is twisting to serve a narrative that Gomotion groomed them. Like, you're not even trying to hide your intentions at this point. It's ridiculous. And while we're on this page, I should mention that the idea that there was never any pre-existing plan to date T, that's just a bold-faced lie. Like, and this is in the same realm as the stuff a page above that I probably can't say explicitly lest I get this video taken down. You're portraying all of this as incidental and unplanned, and you're again trying to undermine or just write out of the narrative the fact that there have been years of, escalating intimacy between you and T. It's victim blaming. Like, especially in this last line of, had T not confessed to me, I would have not entered a relationship with him at that time. It's like she's trying to blame T for coercing her into a relationship instead of the other way around. It's just completely ridiculous. Okay, so I've just spent a while going over the rest of this document, including the bulk of the late 2021-2022 section and everything else afterwards. I don't actually think I'm going to include those in the video because it's a lot of rehashing the same strategies Gomotion has used before. Like, you could take the ideas that I go over in this video and reasonably apply it to the entire document. I guess what I want to focus on is, firstly, I wanted to circle back to Praesidium Inc. and their definition of grooming. Now that we know the extent of Gomotion's actions, taking a zoomed out look at everything we've seen thus far is the proper thing to do in order to draw some sort of overarching conclusion, right? So, predators often target children that have obvious vulnerabilities such as, and then it goes over these criteria. Things we ought to take note of here are problems at home and isolation from their peers. Let's go back to Gomotion's document. I think it's page 1. We are immediately admitting T is in a vulnerable place. Actually, this is a thing that Gomotion conveniently leaves out in her document. This was, yes, right here. 2021, experiencing homelessness. There's another major vulnerability there. And bear in mind, this is prior to Gomotion actually meeting up in person with T. It's also important to note just how quickly the two became close, right? We want to circle back to the idea that Gomotion was like trauma dumping on T. Essentially, 4 days after they started consistently interacting with each other. This is like textbook targeting. So we can check the boxes here. This next point. The offender then works to build trust and emotional connection with the child, often by showering them with special attention. This creates a sense of loyalty and dependence, making the child less likely to question or report the offender's future actions. You're probably thinking of the exact thing that I'm thinking of, that being Gomotion's immediately tacking on the label of little sister onto T within days of consistently interacting with them. There's that theme of loyalty and dependence. On isolating the child, Gomotion was continually problematic when it came to T's partner. And this is a piece of the narrative that I haven't covered in depth, mostly because the extent of Gomotion's manipulation is mostly relegated to their direct actions towards T and the damage control they're now conducting, which I will get to. But it's important to note that Gomotion has engaged in this too. When it comes to the desensitizing process, Gomotion was not shy about discussing their gender dysphoria in pretty graphic detail with T. You can find this corroborated in their document, and when it comes to Gomotion admitting they have problems with oversharing, they basically admit to that being true. So, as you see, this is basically an open and shut case. Every single box has been checked here, right? Like, all the way down, child grooming process, down to initiating abuse. And the only sticking point here would be the actual initiation, which evidently Gomotion has tried to shield herself from, saying that, oh, but everything was consensual, there are no ulterior motives, nothing was planned, all that shit. No. Gomotion is a groomer, and she knows it. She's just trying to hide it. From this point forward, I then wanted to go over how Gomotion uses language to sort of aid in her attempts to deflect and sort of downplay the situation. So we've already covered that Gomotion groom tea. There's basically no arguing around it. There's a specific line that I'm looking for. Yep, this one right here. Disgusting and false accusations that have made me feel absolutely sick to my stomach. Like, okay, you're welcome to think that if you actually have evidence to disprove the accusations. But, and this, actually, we see this multiple times throughout the document. You see in, like, yeah, page 1, right here. The idea of this makes me feel absolutely sick. There's a theme developing here, strong emotional language. You're trying to provoke sympathy and outrage from, I presume, your fans, probably the people in your Discord more than anyone, right? And you're trying to provoke this response against the accusation itself rather than, actually addressing the evidence and disproving it in any conceivable way. We're flipping the narrative here. You're trying to act like you're being victimized instead of taking accountability. And this is the important bit. Pair this with, let's use this specific paragraph as an example. She does this a lot, where I wish I could have spared us both the burden of this friendship. There's a lot of talk where Gomotion appears downtrodden, and there's a heavy emphasis on regretfulness. Like, I'm not here to question whether or not Gomotion actually means this. That's not my place. What I will say, however, is that these are placed pretty selectively throughout the document. Like, you can find these sprinkled throughout. This isn't just a one-off thing. It's almost like she's trying to frame herself as like a victim of circumstance rather than the person who did this, right? This lines up with the idea I mentioned previously, the idea of victimization over accountability. Like, this didn't happen to you because you did it. Actually, I want to stress the idea that Gomotion wants you to believe she's a victim of circumstance because it's why she brings up her mental health struggles so much, especially at the very beginning. She's using that as an excuse, and that if she was in her quote-unquote right mind, she wouldn't have done any of this. Never mind that this behavior lasted over several years. This is to say that Gomotion is intentionally trying to bait sympathy here, at least in my mind, and to that end, basically every apology featured in this document is paired with an explanation that, I guess for lack of a better term, dilutes responsibility. Again, the underlying purpose behind all of this is to shield Gomotion from any blame for her actions. And these supposed apologies are all accompanied by, at least in some regard, a way she can justify or explain away her actions. That's the main goal behind this document, in my mind at least. So that takes care of that document. I think the final thing to discuss was her actions past this point. If you didn't know, a couple days ago, Gomotion took down the tweet posting her response document. Now, ignoring how that's definitely not something an innocent person would do, she has essentially made it obvious that she's not interested in taking accountability. She's been deleting comments from her YouTube page. I actually posted a comment myself, which got deleted. Like less than an hour of posting it. I think I literally just commented Kendrick Lamar and it got hidden. So there's that. She has, however, made it clear she's intent on continuing to upload as per a couple days ago. This was posted August 13th. And according to a few anonymous sources related to the drama, she's been remaking her Discord, among other things. Now, take these statements with however much salt you wish. But I think what these actions are doing is trying to make it such that as few people know about what she's done as possible. Like, she's been hiding replies on Twitter. She's been hiding comments on YouTube. She hasn't posted anything to Patreon. Her Discord is private, and basically nothing has come out related to it since, like the 7th, I think, whenever Nefarious Clown stopped posting about it. Again, she doesn't want to take accountability. She just wants to make sure as few people know about what she's done as possible. which is why I don't think Gomotion deserves your sympathy. Like a bunch of popular creators have come out of the woodwork saying things like, I hope she gets the help she needs, all that shit. That's a great sentiment, but we ought not to be this courteous with someone who's been as manipulative as I hope I've proved her as being. She doesn't deserve your support or the popularity she's been graciously imparted by people who genuinely believe she's a good person who wouldn't engage in the shit she has. Alright, that's all I have for this video. I mostly wanted to get my thoughts out there as I haven't really seen anyone talk about the situation in this way. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Open floor. Bye.